Hello and welcome to School for Writers Season 2! Woohoo! We are in our second season, and if you haven't listened to Season 1, you still have time to go back and binge listen to all of it. But what we're super excited to offer you here on this season is we're going to delve deeper and deeper into how you can write more, publish more, and make more money off of your writing. We are here to help you ditch that tortured artist cliche and thrive as a writer, as a storyteller. Whether you are someone who is just a weekend journaler, or whether you want to write that great American novel, or you just want to put a book out into the world because it's been something you've wanted to do forever. Maybe you want to write more poetry. Maybe you want to put a book out to help build your entrepreneur life and your business. Whatever your writer goals are, we are here to support you in writing more, publishing more, and making more money. Now, before you can actually get to the writing and publishing and making money part, which all sounds really fun, you need to do some serious soul searching into what's your writing ritual look like? What does your space look like? How are you going to set yourself up for success in 2021 to write your friggin' book already, to journal every day, to have a writing ritual, to publish more, to make more content for your book? How are you going to write more? How are you going to create a space to write more? How are you going to create a physical space in your life? How are you going to carve out time in your calendar? How are you going to do that? Well, today we're going to focus on the actual space, the physical space around you that you need to write. And I have noticed in my life that when you have a lot of clutter, when you don't have an actual space that is yours creatively, when you're surrounded by stuff, then it can be really difficult to actually get your butt to write. Sometimes I used to sit down in a crowded, cluttered desk and I would just spend the whole time trying to clean it. Or I'd feel guilty, or there'd be things in the way. I literally couldn't put my stuff down and I'd have to move stuff out of the way. So that is why I brought on Jen Rao to talk with us today. Jen Rao is a minimalist home organizer who specializes in clutter clearing and its magical benefits. Y'all know how much I love my witchy magicalness, the magical benefits of clutter clearing. She helps her clients create peace in their lives through clearing their mind, home, and spirit. Y'all, I'm here for this. I'm so here for this. In 2017, Jen downsized her life and now lives in a renovated fifth wheel RV. After traveling full-time for 2 years, she settled in Squamish, BC, where she continues to share her fresh, approachable take on clearing space to live with intention. You can find her work at clearyourlife.ca and connect with her on Instagram. And we're about to have a whole masterclass on how to clear your space for creativity together. So y'all need to listen because this changed me. This changed me. I learned about zones. I learned about how I need to maybe use some more tape to tape off some places. I learned about how I need to make it easy to put things away. I've been focusing on making it easy to find things, but what about putting them away? Make it easy to put things away. And I realized that by investing some time in clearing a creative space, I can tell myself, my world, the universe, my spirit, whatever I believe in, God, the universe, spirituality, my family, myself, my psyche, my subconscious, that creativity matters to me, that writing matters to me. Clearing a writing space shows everything, everyone, every ounce of your DNA that writing is important to you. So we're starting the new year with clearing space for writing, clearing an intentional space for you to spend 2021 writing. I'm super excited to share this with you. Jen is going to show you how and make it guilt-free, shame-free, and really easy. So I'm beyond excited to bring you this episode with Jen Rao on clearing physical space out to help you write. After 2020, I know that a lot of us can be a little nervous about setting some goals for 2021. Heck, this year's already been kind of a crazy wild year, right? Well, here's the deal. You still deserve to create time and space in your life for your dreams. This is your year to write your book, to journal daily, to go back to that ritual that you used to have of journaling or writing, whatever it was. I know that the world seems like it is on fire right now, but you still deserve to carve out some time in your life for writing, which is why I have created for you the Write More Challenge. For 10 minutes a day for just 10 days. 10 minutes a day for 10 days. That's totally doable, right? I'm going to help you create the physical and mental space that you need in your life to write. Don't put your writing dreams off for any longer. Not because of a pandemic, not because you're busy, not because of anything. Your dreams, they deserve space in your life. And I want to help you carve that space out. So check it out at writemorechallenge.com. Hello, Jen. We are so excited to have Jen Rao here on the podcast talking with us about the importance of clearing your space. And Jen, I'm going to have you introduce yourself in a little bit. I just did a formal introduction, but I want to say this is actually a really hard topic for me because I come from a long line of hoarders and I come from a mess around me. It looks real good on screen, but around me it's a mess. So I'm excited. This is something that I personally want to learn a lot about. So I'm excited to have you on. So why don't you tell us all a little bit about who you are before I start fangirling out on this idea that you're going to help me declutter my writing space. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, well, it's integral to my story, and I'm so glad that you led with that. I have really great news. I come from a long line of hoarders as well.
Woohoo! There's hope for us yet.
Yes. So it's a big part of my backstory is that like I was not raised to be an organized person. I shopped a lot. I collected a lot. I had messy apartments. I had all of the things. I had the frustrations and losing things and not getting promotions at work and thinking that like I should be doing better than this. And then when I discovered minimalism and decluttering, it was like everything fell into place. Truly. So that's like, and that's why people love working with me too in person, especially because I'm just like, oh yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So it's not like this thing that you have to be born with. And I really want to make sure that everyone hears that. So I'll say it one more time. You do not have to be born organized. You can absolutely learn and take small steps every day to become more organized.
I love that. You do not have to be born organized. I'm writing it down in my notes. First things first.
Yeah. And I'm a travel lover. I'm a Canadian. I live in Squamish, BC right now. My husband and I downsized our lives in 2017 and traveled full time for 2 years. We lived in 112 square feet and we've now upgraded to 300 square feet. So I live in a fifth wheel, which is much larger than my first home on wheels. And just really having a playful time with life. And a big part of it for me was being able to let go of things and be able to keep a clear space. And that's absolutely why I'm helping others do it now too.
I love that. Okay, again, goal to be like an organized person, a minimalist, and goals to live. Like I have an RV and my goals are to live in it. So that's gonna have to be a whole other podcast, like how to travel in an RV.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I'd love to know for the listeners, not for me and my personal goals of living in an RV. We'll have that conversation offline. So I'm going to just start. I have a lot of questions for you, but I want to just start with this first one. Why does it even matter that my space as a creative is clear? I have been writing I'm 38 years old and I've been writing since I was 8. That's however many years, 3 decades that's why I'm a writer, not a mathematician. That was an easy math and I couldn't do it. That's 3 decades of me writing in complete mess. And I've, it's kind of worked. Why does it matter that my space is clear?
I always like people to know that the more space that you have, that it's easier to work in. So it also gives you extra space for new ideas to come. When I work with people in their home offices, there's often a case of wanting to hold on to like many, many notebooks and every single idea that's ever popped into their head, and there's honestly this like unspoken fear around letting go of ideas in case maybe like you let go of the big one. But what always happens once people trust me and trust themselves and actually clear away some space is they actually find it so much easier to focus and to produce really great content. So there no doubt in my mind that you're have been writing fabulous things throughout your whole writing career. I just firmly believe that it can come even easier if you can focus and not have to search for things. And I just honestly think that having less things around you is easier. Like, think about when you go camping. And you only have that one set of dishes, or you only have, that one book that you brought to read, and consider it back towards your home where you might have to dig to find things. Like, it brings up frustrations, like, even if you're not cognizant of it. But I think that, like, minimizing your possessions is like the cheat code to being organized. And then that also boosts your confidence. So it's like, it's all connected, truly. So
Yeah.
that was a big answer, but
No, I loved it. You brought up a couple things. Digging to find things brings up frustration. I think that that's so real because if you can't, and that's one of the reasons why I just leave everything everywhere, because if it's out on
Mhm,
the floor, I can find it. And
mhm,
there's like a joke that the minute if I can't find it, it's because I put it away where it's supposed to be.
mhm,
And so I have noticed that when I love that you brought up when you go camping, because when I do take off, I am a COVID cliche. I bought an RV because I'm so used to taking off and going 6 weeks or 8 weeks to a cabin in the woods, to a place in Mexico, to a rented location that's clear of everything. And all
mhm.
I bring is my book and my work. And I take clients from there, but that's it. I don't bring any of the other baggage. I don't bring any stuff. I try to keep the limited amount of clients during those times to do it. And so during COVID, I haven't been able to do that. So I got an RV. And when I take it out, there's no distractions. There's not a million different things around me in my life. And I think about how getting away from distractions, going to a coffee shop, going outside in my backyard, going in the RV, even going to a friend's house, all these things I used to do a lot. But like even outside, even changing rooms makes a huge difference in my productivity. So I can only imagine that. And I'm like, the least distractions, turn off the Wi Fi, turn off the stuff. But I don't really think about that as stuff as being a distraction too. I'm used to like, get off social media, turn off your Wi Fi, focus. I'm
Mhm.
not used to, there's piles of things around me, they're affecting my focus too.
Okay, so imagine that you have a pile in your workspace that's on the ground right now, and you've been meaning to put it away for 2 weeks. The energy around it is that even if you're working on your work, anytime that you glance over at that pile, it's going to bring up feelings of procrastination, of regret, possibly of guilt. And it can all happen in a fleeting second. And that's the thing about when these piles grow around us, is it almost becomes like a blanket of those negative feelings. And that's why a big reason why clearing the space and having the ability to focus, because you don't have all of these little emotions being triggered, whether you realize it or not. That's also, I think, such an interesting part of it. Like, you're just, you go through your day working, but that could be happening over and over again, or if you keep something that has a bad memory tied to it, same thing. Like, you glance over and you see, and it's like, oh, and like, you just go about your day, but that those little bits over and over and over again really add up.
Yeah, that's so interesting you bring that up because I have this like pile right here that I keep of things that need to be recycled that can't be in the regular recycling. And I
Mhm.
beat myself up all the time because I haven't figured out where to recycle like these batteries or this can of paint. And it just keeps getting bigger of all these things that I don't want to just put in the trash because they're toxic, but I can't. And every time I look at it, I was like, God, I should really deal with that. Oh, I should
Mhm.
really deal with that. Oh, I should really deal with that. And I hadn't really thought about how this pile of recycled things affects my like psyche. Every time I sit,
Mhm.
it's right next to my business. So every time I sit
Yeah.
down, I have a small space for my office and I see that pile of batteries that needs recycling. I don't think like that sets me up when I sit down to work, when I sit down to write, when I sit down to coach my writing clients, when I sit down to write my books, it affects me. And I hadn't even
Mhm.
thought about that. As you were talking, I was like, oh my God, I have that pile right here next to me.
Yep. Yeah, it's that feeling of being behind. So you're sitting down to do your work for the day. And then if you glance at that pile, it's like, oh, I'm already behind, and it really, really can add up without us realizing it. So
Yeah. So what where do you even start? I mean, I've started a little bit. I'm not like 101. I've been really, I mean, I move a lot. So this is the thing for me. I moved since I was 18, I moved every single year. And so I just got rid of everything each time I moved. And the last time I did a major move, I only could fit everything into my Subaru, and that included my dog had to have room and I had to have room. So I really had brought nothing with me, and that felt so good. And now I've lived with my sister for 5 years and I've started gaining stuff again. And I just
Totally.
keep being like, I have to move to get rid of my stuff. So in my head, the only way to get rid of everything is to move. And even this weekend, I was like, okay, imagine that you're moving out, you're moving to New York City in a tiny little apartment. You can only bring a suitcase with you. What are you taking with you? So for me, there's only like that psychological, I am forced to clean.
Mhm.
What does that healthily look like when you're trying to make that first step? Like you're not being forced to clean. Like, how do you force yourself to clean?
Yeah. Well, before even getting into the physical work of removing the clutter, I always get my clients, an audience to think about like, what do you want your space to look like, and what do you
Mm.
want it to feel like? And I was very excited to see how much you talk about journaling, because this could be a huge piece of your journal practice. And I love to tell this story that, well, I've already said, so I am not the woman that was like, oh, when I was 3, I was organizing everyone's spaces. Like, it's just not me. But the other thing too is that when I started on this journey for myself, I was getting really deep into my journal practice. And so I did some scripting and some future visioning of like, how do I want my life to feel? What do I want it to look like? And I would write about it a little bit every day. And the journaling alone also is a daily habit. So it's, instilling that confidence and doing something and keeping up with it. But I love to have people write out, like, what do you want your space to look like? How do you want to feel when you wake up? What will it mean to you to have this space cleared, to really build up so much motivation within before you even start, honestly? Because I think that sometimes you get to a point where you're just really frustrated and you're like, that's it, this weekend I'm decluttering my whole house, and you start moving things around, and it's really easy. It almost always happens that you make a bigger mess before it gets better, but it's really easy to get stuck in that big mess spot because then you get tired, didn't really have a plan, you're just like, oh, and then it's over, and you haven't made the progress that you wanted to make. So I always suggest, getting really clear on why you're doing it, seeing the end result before you've even created it, and then taking like really small, steady steps. So I think that there's many, many different decluttering and organizing methods out there. Some are very extreme, some less so. And I think that they all work for different reasons. And it really just depends on the person. So, what I teach is what worked for me, which was in the beginning, just doing small areas and starting with what's something easy that I can do? What's something that I can do that takes 10 minutes or under an hour, that doesn't involve anything that has sentimental attachment. Like, you don't want to get yourself worked up and then stuck on this, are you going to donate something that your grandma gave you, right? Like, building the momentum. And so, honestly, I think a great place to start for you would be those batteries.
Yeah, that I was
Very
like, yeah,
specific
these
to you.
batteries are probably a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's building the muscle, right? Like every little bit helps, and doing the projects in the same steps each time also really helps. So I teach people to do the same 4 steps, although it can be adapted to the different areas that you're in.
I
So,
love that you brought
and
up that you make a bigger mess when you try it. That was my weekend.
oh
I was like, okay,
yeah,
cool. I'm gonna clear clutter out. I'm talking to
yeah,
Jen. I gotta clear some clutter. There's an eclipse we're
yeah,
supposed to clear out. And
right.
I
Oh
had this
yeah.
plans for clearing my house on Monday during the eclipse and just clearing everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to say, I started with just one section of my room, and that section looked really good. And then when I finished that, I was exhausted
Mm-hmm.
emotionally and everything that it brings up. And I didn't do anything else. And I felt like a total loser, like a slacker that I hadn't done the whole house. And so I
Right.
love that you just gave
Mm-hmm.
permission to start with
Oh yeah.
that one section, because that one section now looks really good and it feels good. And now I want to do that to other sections. But
That's
I was beating myself up for not having done the batteries in the corner. So
it.
I love that you were like, okay, start small, 10 minutes or less, and not emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that it sounds really good in marketing to be like, clear your whole house in 2 weeks or less. Like, I could have never done that. I don't know, like maybe other people can, but that's
Well,
just
that sounds
like,
like people who started with a clean house. It's gonna take a couple
yeah,
months around these parts.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the decision making takes a while, and I'll just repeat myself. It's a muscle that you build. Like every time that you make a firm decision on if you're going to keep something or not, like that you get better and better at it, and it's really about that steady momentum of continuing to do so. Yeah, so because what you described to me that you did on the new moon, I'm like, yeah, like I'm cheering for you, huge. Like that's a really big deal. That's the other thing. We're so hard on ourselves. We never think we're doing enough. And we need to be so kind to ourselves in this process because it's not easy. It's just
Yeah.
not easy. It can be easier, and you can build things into the routine to make it feel more easeful. But it's not just like turning on a switch and then, oh, easy. I
Yeah.
don't believe in that.
I think I've always wanted to be one of those people who just turned on the switch and they like I have so much shame over being somebody who had a room full of crap as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Or who didn't prioritize this before as an adult. Like I feel like I'm a child if I have a dirty room. And
Mm.
how does that like play into other parts? So I love that you brought up that it's not just about the stuff. It's not always easy. Like there's so much.
Yeah.
I also think how many my mother's love language is gift giving. So if you get
Yeah.
rid of something she gave you, you are getting rid of her love. And
Mm-hmm.
how hard it can be. I often start with like all these things she got me that I don't want, but like start with easier stuff. I thought about that. I was like, oh yeah, of course I should start with this thing my mom gave me that is loaded, whereas this pile of batteries is probably a
Mm-hmm.
really good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then if you start with a pile of batteries, and in a few months, say you get to that point where you're at some of the gifts that your mom gave you, like you will be a very different person by then, and have a very different viewpoint. You'll also have seen change. I find that the change that you see in consistently working on clearing your life and your home, like really builds that momentum of keeping going, and it makes things easier, like gifts. So. But
Yeah.
that's about as hard as it gets, right? Like gifts are things passed down to you, truly. So don't start there. You don't need to be there yet. It's not
Okay.
time.
I don't need to be there yet. I'm writing that down. I don't need to get rid of that random pile of things my mom gave me yet. I love that.
No.
So you mentioned that you have like a system that you have people go through. Is that
Mm-hmm.
something that you can share with us, or is that
Sure.
complicated? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, no. Oh, I try and make everything as easy as possible.
Love
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Okay.
Ease in structures and systems. That is my favorite right now.
So it's 4 steps, and they all start with C. So you collect, clear, commit, and complete. So like you did in your room, you chose one small area. I think it's really important, especially when you're building the muscle with this, that you choose an area that you're like, I'm confident I can finish what I'm starting. So for some people that might be a pencil case, and for other people it might be their dresser. Like there's a range of how much you could get done depending on your energy level, the time of the month. Like there's so many different reasons that you might do more or less. We always start with collecting. So you take everything out of whatever space that you've chosen, everything, so that before you put it back in, it's blank and you're cleaning it, and really like giving that kind of energetic once over that is like, it's like it's empty and it's ready to receive what you put back. So you collect, and then clearing is when you're actually purging and deciding if you're going to keep it or not. Committing is for me the piece where I'm kind of bringing in minimalism a little bit more, and the idea that like what asking yourself what actions brought this space to where it is, and what do I need to change in order for it to stay how I want it to stay. So I think that anyone can, go around their house with a box and, throw things into it and feel good for a while, but like, yeah, I decluttered. But if you're not changing your habits and your actions, like the risk is that your space will just keep going back to the same state. So that's step number 3. And I like people to think about it like while they're in it. It could have to do with shopping. It could have to do with just your daily habits. but that's number 3. And then 4 is complete. So put it all back. Don't leave it for later. Have it be done, whether it takes you 10 minutes or an hour, or if you have more time on a weekend, say 2 hours. And just know that, okay, I got that done. And that's how I work with my clients. And it's interesting because you can do it on a micro and a macro scale, right? So we'll do those 4 steps going throughout their home office, but then it kind of creates that journey in the whole space as well, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it makes sense that that would then feed your creativity. So as you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, all 4 of these steps are practice that you would almost sit down to like create a character or create a novel or
Mm,
create a book or create a
yeah.
journal. Like you collect all the ideas, you clear
Mhm.
everything out that doesn't need to be in it. You commit to one. Like this is very similar to how I tell people to choose a book title. You like pull out all your ideas, put down, clear the ones that don't work for you or don't work right now, commit to one and complete that. Like how do you choose a book to write? How do you choose a book title? How do you choose what characters? There's just
Yep.
like you really, so I could see how practicing this could help you in other areas of creativity, like how much of procrastination is just clutter of the mind. So if you
Hmm.
practice this with physical tangible things, I could see how this could easily help with the less tangible clutter that's happening in your ideas and your creative mind.
Amazing. Well, and whenever you have a system that you can stick to, and not just any system, it has to be one that works for you, right? Like, I think sometimes we get like system envy. We're like, oh, I just wish that like I was that there's organizers out there that like I will never behave like, and I still have these little moments of like, oh, I wish, if only everything in my life looked exactly like, and they line everything up perfect. Like my drawers don't look like that, but I know where everything is, so it's a system that works for me. And what you just said about, taking it from how you coach writers to practicing it in with physical items, it also, like, to bring it back to you, it's the idea that like you have these storylines from being a child having a messy room, but you're this like badass woman, person um who can take what you do in your coaching practice and apply it to clearing your home and your life. So cool.
Yeah, and it's one thing you just said, like, it makes me so happy to know that you don't have the perfectly organized Marie Kondo. Like, to me, I think, okay, there's 2 options. There's mess
Right.
or Marie
Right.
Kondo. And
Yep.
I don't
Hmm.
want to perfectly roll I'm never gonna be the person whose underwear drawer is like folded. I
Yep.
don't see the point in folding my underwear
Hmm.
drawer, but that doesn't mean that I have to have a pile of batteries next to me. Like,
Right.
where is that line? And I love that you brought up that choose a system that works for you. And I love
Hmm.
that you brought up that you're like not that perfect organizer, but you still know where everything is, which
Yep.
I think I don't currently always. So
Right.
I know
Yeah.
in my business, it's so interesting because in my business, I'm so organized. I have systems, I have details, things are in the exact place. I know exactly where they are versus like the rest of my life is so
Hmm.
not organized. My sister makes fun of me. I'm so organized in my professional life. And in my room, it's just like clutter central. I don't know where anything is.
Yeah.
So I love the idea that you can take wherever it works for you and try to like I can
Hmm.
do this when it comes to writing. I
Hmm.
can't do this when it comes to my bedroom. Although now I feel like I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do
Yeah.
this.
I believe in you. It's so funny though, because I just think that, so the example of like folding everything perfectly to put in your dresser, like that's an organizing system that would make your life harder, not easier. So like, what does it look like for you to have organized drawers where you can find everything and you just feel good about getting dressed? Like there's so many nuances to not have to follow one star professional organizer exactly. Like, um, I don't know. It should make your life easier, not harder.
Mhm. Yeah, and the idea of having this that is actually like such it's funny how that was such a relief to hear you say that because I'm like, "Oh god, I can still be organized and not like the fold not have to fold my undies."
Yep.
I don't know why that one particular thing I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
never gonna be," and I feel like I'm like, "I'm never gonna be the person with that perfect house. I don't wanna live in that perfectly organized house, like, where
Hmm.
everything has an exact spot and is all perfect and, like, with their lines," but I also don't wanna live in the clutter. So like
Yep.
finding my balance, where my balance is. And I love that you started with journaling because I don't think I've put enough personally, and I know a lot of my like clients they're used to organizing other parts of their life. They're not necessarily used to organizing their creative space. So one thing I have a question for you, because we have a program called a Write More Challenge. And one of the things I do is help people carve out people who are in small places, or they maybe have a large house, but they have lots of people living in it. How do you
Mhm.
carve out what would you suggest for carving out an actual physical space? Like, how big does it need to be? How can we actually carve out a physical space in our life? I mean, you're living in a fifth wheel.
Yes,
Like, I'm talking to somebody who's living
exactly.
in a fifth wheel. For those who don't
Yeah.
know what a fifth wheel is, you want to explain that?
Sure. So it's a type of RV that you need a pickup truck to. It's like a trailer but it has like a nose that goes over the bed of a pickup truck. And it's 36 feet long, and we have they're called slide outs. So we have 300 square feet. It's adorable. It's like a sweet little apartment that we can take anywhere. But my workspace. So I work from home when I'm not working with clients in their homes. So I use the kitchen table, and the living room's right next to us, and the bedroom's a couple steps away. So I totally get the small space thing. And what really works for me, and what I would suggest, is to have, if you can, and this is where the minimizing and the only keeping what you really need on hand, especially in a very small space, will help. But if you can keep everything that can get tucked away in a nice bag, so that you're actually bringing your office out and then taking it away. And so that when the office is away and safe in the bag, and like I keep mine in a cupboard when I'm not using it. But the idea is that like I can kind of, like turn off work mode, and it moves into living mode. And I've found, and that's where, holding on to binders and binders and so many things, especially in a small space, can be really tough. But I'm building a business at a 90 centimeter diameter table right now, and I haven't written a book, but I feel like I could write a book sitting here too.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because the smaller spaces I've had, the more organized I've been.
Yeah,
I live in
necessity.
right? I live in I've lived in a tiny, I've lived in a tiny cabin.
Mm.
And it was like one thing here, one thing there. Like everything was a one room studio. Whereas here I now live with my sister in a 3-bedroom house. And it's like I really believe that your collection of stuff expands to the size you're in. And it's actually, I think, harder for me to have large space than to have a small space, because a small space, I personally am like, okay, cool, I can't buy anything. Whereas
Yeah.
like now I'm like, well, I could kind of shove something more over in that corner over here.
Mhm.
So I love that idea though, especially because all of us are really working from home right now. There's a pandemic, but even when the pandemic's over, we'll probably have more people working from home. I built a business where I can work from anywhere on purpose. I love that idea of like work never ends then
Mhm.
if you're living in your workspace. I love that idea of closing it up, packing it up, putting it away. And I love
Mhm.
the putting away because you know it's done, but I love the idea. I always tell my clients, come up with a ritual that tells your body, okay, this is writing time. So getting something out of a bag and setting it up and being like, okay, writing time. Like for me,
Mhm.
it's tea and a bit of nature. If I'm in tea and nature, it's writing time. I have a target. This is something I have started doing. I started making my bed as soon as I get up, getting out my um like I have this little lap table and putting that up, and then my brain knows, okay, it's writing time. I'm only in my bed. The only thing I have to clear is my bed and this little table that I bring out. And then when writing time's over, I tuck it away, and I find that when I pull out the table, it's writing time. I got it from Target. It has a
Yes.
little slide. It's writing time. So I'm trying personally. I love this. Like I'm learning so much from this. I love when I bring people on that I'm learning from. I'm thinking, okay, how can that is my like writing ritual. How can I come up with other rituals where like I tuck that has this perfect little space that it goes into under my bed? What else can I tuck away that I currently have out everywhere?
Hmm. And I think like moving from talking about really small spaces to, the medium to large office that you're now inhabiting and working in, for your space that you're in, I would say doing a nice little purge, because there's always stuff that doesn't need to be in your space. Get those batteries out of there. If there's things that you're not using, you don't love it, you don't need it, and it would feel good to get it out, like using the 4 steps and just going through and always minimizing first. But then when you have a bit more space to play with, like think about zones in your office. So like where, and use tape to start with, even on the shelves, but label like where do things go. So when you're done with them, they have a home. And it's just like, honestly, it's like Montessori schools. It's just like we're going back to things that we learned and were taught when we were very young, that it's like, when I'm done, I put this away. And honestly, it can be that simple. But if you don't know where something goes, then it stays out. Obviously, I would do the exact same thing. So this works all over your home, but especially talking about your office, you could have it in zones with like writing, coursework. Um, what would be some? I'm going to ask you. What would be some zones in your office that might give the listeners some ideas if we
Well, I
use
think
your
it's
space?
interesting you talked about zones because I can't write in my office space. So I'm actually, you can kind of, for those who are watching on YouTube or Facebook, the video, I'm in a corner. So this little corner right here is my office. On the other side of the camera is a full garage. So I have a corner in a garage. So it's a
Ah,
big space, but
mhm.
I would say I have 1% of this, 5% of the whole big garage space. The rest of it is my sister's office, my sister's art studio, the extra refrigerator, and the washing machine and dryer, and like clothes hung up everywhere. So I have a couple questions out of that, but my first thing is zones. So I realized when I come into here, this feels like work. It is very hard for me to write my creative projects, my novels and stuff here,
Mm,
because it feels like work. I can write blog posts, I can write podcast scripts, I can write emails to clients, I can do all these things I have to do for work that's writing. But my creative writing projects, work is too much work.
yeah.
Like everything feels work here. So what I started doing is creating that bed. Like I just do it in bed in the morning. And how can I make my bed feel more? So I've like really, the cleaning of my room has really been, how can I make this a place where I just wake up and write? Or I can write before I go to bed, come and write. And how can this be a creative space? And then also I have a little outdoor chair that I started being like, okay, cool. How can I get this one little chair we have outside be a creative space too? So it's interesting, without calling them zones, I've
Hmm.
started being like, okay, this is my creativity zone. And for all of this, I just need my computer. So I move my computer to the creativity zone, or I bring my journal and my pens, my 30,000 pens that I have, to the creativity zone. I guess not 30,000, but I have my like 5 different colored pens. That it
Yeah.
started with one color and now it's 5 that I journal in. And I'm not going to stop my pin habit. I'm just going to say that straight up. It's like the pins are organized.
Yeah.
um, and yeah. And so I think about like the way in which my journal, I have organized different things in different ideas in different colors. And I use the colors for a system. Sorry, I hit my mic. I use my journal and the different colors of different systems. I'm like, I love it, this idea of zones. How do I create? And this is what I tell people when they're trying to create the physical space in their life for writing. I think we think, and I do this myself, I want a whole cabin in the woods that is completely set up to be a writer. And don't get me wrong, like my goal one day is to create that retreat for people where they can go, there's no Wi-Fi, it's perfectly set up for being a writer. Totally goals. However, I'm a writer, that's not a word. The reality is that even if you could rent that for a day, a week, a month, a year, it's still limited. How can we create one little square bit? And so for me, I always have tea and I always have a bit of nature. And then when I know I sit down, tea and nature, and I do this like quick breathing exercise, and then I go and write. Like for me, that's it. So I wonder, I love this idea of zones. So I'm like, okay, creative zone. I wonder if listeners could do something like I've done, is a bed, a chair, a place in your house, a particular type of tea, a particular
Mhm.
view. Like where in your house could you change locations, even if you have to move to like the kitchen counter like you did, where can you change a location so you're telling yourself, location wise, this is my creative space? And then you don't, like, I don't go outside, I don't do anything else in my bed but read or write my own books. Like that's it. I don't do anything else on this outdoor chair but read or write my own books, and read other people's books or write my own books. So I wonder, I'm not sure the answer yet, but I love this idea of calling it a zone and really being conscious and protecting. I mean, I really, really like this idea of more tape. I love like
Yeah.
taping out places that you're talking about, like
Yep.
zoning out, taping out where things go. Because I think honestly, there's a reason you teach a kid to put a thing back exactly where it goes back, right? And
Hmm.
now I'm rambling, but I'm just loving this
I
idea
love it.
of zones and of tape,
Yeah.
especially marking out zones, or even like a sign, even if it's not a real sign, like I moved pieces of nature into near I set up an altar near my next to my bed, to my creativity, to my right. I moved a piece of nature by that chair. Like how can you set up that zone?
Yep. Well, and I think the beautiful thing about what you just talked about, dear listeners, if you notice this, but Lauren is so in tune with her intuition that she wasn't like, that's it. I'm going to sit down at this desk in this corner of this garage and I'm going to write my book no matter what. Like, you really thought about what you needed, what you wanted, and you made something else happen. And I just think that that's really beautiful and deserves kudos. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
And that's the thing, like, we get
Gold
to make
star.
this up. Yeah. so so I love that part of it. And then yeah, like for the practical side of it, make it easy to put things away. You know, but also don't make your zones until you've done a purge and a declutter, because it makes everything so much easier. So it's doing things in the right order, and then it's just think, how can I make this easier on myself? How can I choose a project today that's going to be easy, like easy, easy, easy. We don't do things when we think it's too hard, but we actually have the power to make it easier, honestly.
I love that. Make it easy to put things away. That I
Yeah.
hadn't even thought about.
Mm-hmm.
I thought like make it easy to find it is keeping it out. Make it
Yeah.
easy to put it away is not something I have thought about before. I love that idea. Making it easy to like if it has a place to put it, you know where to put it. Make it easy to
Mm-hmm.
put it away. I keep thinking about like these batteries are not away because I don't even know where to start in recycling batteries. And like Google.
Yeah.
But how could I create a spreadsheet even like, okay, you got this, or like how can I find something? I think about the recycling, the things that they send you for up on the wall. Like, how can I make it easy to put away the things that I have in my life? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to find them now that they're out. And so maybe I
Yep.
was asking the wrong question.
Yep. Yep.
Love that.
Make it easy to put it
Yeah.
away.
So I have a question that I'm sure a lot of my listeners are going to have as well. And what if you're stuck with living with somebody who, like, how do you deal with other people? My sister is a collector of things. She's tried to purge, she purges a lot, but she holds on to things in a way that I don't. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of what is in my space, including the batteries, is something shared with her or something that she brought in or something in her home. How do you deal with like how do you set those boundaries? How do you
Mm-hmm.
talk to other people? How do you deal with this if you guys have different ideas of what should stay and what should go?
Well, I'll follow that up with a funny story of where I did it totally wrong.
I love that. Learn from our
With my
mistakes, right?
husband. Yeah, so when we were downsizing, I didn't ask him, but he had gotten as a present a garlic press. And we had an ice cream scoop. And I was just like in my hand, I was like, we're going like we went hardcore downsizing at that time. So I was like, we don't need this ice cream scoop. It's cluttering up the drawer. I'm not quite like that anymore. But anyways, I donated both of those things without asking him, and it's 4 or 5 years later, and I'll never live it down. And I don't blame him. Truly, like it was super disrespectful that I did that. So my advice when you're dealing with other people, one is always start with your own stuff. It can be really easy to look around and be like, oh, but they have this and they have that, and if only they. But unless you have touched every single thing that you specifically own, you have more work to do. So truly like start there. And then that leads into the follow up on that, which is as you lead by example, generally your people will come with you. And it can be a long journey, but it's definitely worth it. You can't force people to change. They the best thing that you can hope for is that they see the joy that you're creating in your life and they want a taste of it too. And they're like, oh, that actually doesn't look so bad. I'm going to give it a shot. Um, and then in the conversations and the boundaries, there's really standard things like using I language and not saying, you did this and, which I also still have to work on, but that's That's my best piece of advice for that. Keep it respectful and like eyes on your own prize, because until that's completely done, it's just not your business yet.
Yeah.
Even though I totally get it. It feels like it, right? You're living in it. So
I think that that's a really great place to ask our last question is that do you have any last minute tips for people who are trying to create a clear space for their writing in their life?
the most common question is, where do I start? And I'll just always say, start anywhere, start small, start easy, pick something, take care of it, and then you move on. Be patient with yourself, work on the belief that you can do it if this is something that you really want. um, Garner up the motivation and the belief in yourself that you are capable of making great change in your life, because we all are. um, and just keep with it. It won't happen overnight. I don't think it has to happen overnight. And don't let anybody else's version of perfection stop you and paralyze you from taking any action. Like, if you can make change in your life starting today. Like, as soon as this podcast episode is done, you could go and make positive change in your life. So I believe in you.
I'm gonna get those batteries recycled. You just watch me. I'm gonna
Yeah.
email you tomorrow. I'll be like, I found a place for the battery
Yes.
recycling. And actually, I don't. That wasn't my last question. I have one more that I would just love to know. Like, what is the best thing that has come from decluttering your space?
Mm. I'm much more confident, and honestly, it's taken me on a really deep journey of self discovery. I've learned so much about myself. I'm more honest with myself. I'm healing on levels that I didn't realize were possible because I have the confidence to do this work now. And for me, excuse me, when my life was cluttered, it really dragged down my confidence. Like, I knew I could do more, and I just always felt held back by my space. And now I feel freed by it. So,
I love that. That is a beautiful, beautiful place to end our
yay.
wonderful interview that I have so many notes on for myself and for my clients to help them out. Just one last question, and that is if people want to hear from you more and learn more about your expertise or even maybe even hire you, where can we find you?
Yes, so I am at clearyourlife.ca, and I'm at clearyourlife on Instagram. And if you go to clearyourlife.ca/guide, you can get a more in-depth booklet of what I was talking about with my 4-step system. And then you'll be on the email list, and you'll get lots of little motivational. I'm in your inbox to make you feel good, truly. So, like, if you ever need to open up your email and be like, I'm so glad I opened this email, those are the kind that I sent.
I
So,
love that. I'm in your inbox to make you feel good. Heck
yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
So I'm on your mailing list now. So I'm excited to feel good in my inbox. So
Yay.
thank you again. And everybody listening, we'll have those links in the show notes so you can just go and click them and find out more about Jen. Thank you again for coming on. This was such a great, super inspiring and really great. This is going to be our first of 2021. So I'm really glad to start the season 2 with the idea of decluttering and creating the space in our lives for creativity. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much. I'm honored.
Have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Our first book recommendation of 2021 is one of the best books that I read in 2020, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And if you haven't read anything by V.E. Schwab yet, I highly suggest reading the Darker Shade of Magic series. It is beyond amazing. V.E. Schwab is such a wonderful writer. And The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is no exception. I love hearing the story behind this book because V. Schwab said that it was like 20 years, I think, in the making, or 10 years, or a long amount of years in the making, where this character of Addie LaRue just kept floating in and out of her brain. And I love the way that the floating in and out of her brain throughout her life played into the storyline of Addie LaRue. So the basic idea is that Addie is somebody who she wants immortality, and she's granted it. She makes a deal with the devil. They don't really call it the devil, but it's some dark, mysterious old god comes and grants Addie immortality, but nobody can remember her. If they like leave a room and come back, they don't know who she is. If they fall asleep and come back, they don't know who she is. And so she is immortal, but not remembered, which is such an interesting concept to me. And the way in which V.E. Schwab connects Addie's life through the years and brings us with her and has us meet these people with her and has us live an immortal but forgotten, forgettable life. It's both tragic and exciting, thrilling and depressing. It takes you on a roller coaster of emotions, and the ending, it's yeah, I can't talk about the ending because I don't want to give it away, but it's so beautiful and meta and brilliant and smart. And it just proves why V. Schwab is one of the best writers that we currently have alive in the fantasy genre. It is just a beautiful, beautiful book. I highly suggest it. It is, I think, kind of like middle adult or new adult, I think they're called. I would say it's probably set for somebody in their 20s, but I'm 38 and loved reading it. So I highly, highly suggest The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's one of the better books that I read in 2020, and I'm super excited that it's our first book recommendation for 2021. There is a link to purchase it from an independent bookstore near you. You can find one in our bio, and if you want to listen to it on audiobook, it's also an amazing audiobook. I highly suggest using Libro.fm. They're an independent way to support independent bookstores while buying books. It is much better than buying off of Amazon or Audible. Support local bookstores, support writers, and buy your books through Libro.fm or through IndieBound. And we have links to both in the show notes. So enjoy The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And let me know, ping me on Instagram at School for Writers, and let me know if you loved this book as much as I did, because it is amazing. Would you like to have your book recommendation out here? Do you have a book that you just love and want to tell the world about? Send us a DM at School for Writers on Instagram, and we will tell you how to record your own book recording so we can have your book recommendation on the podcast during season 2.